Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mountainside Podcast. Our guest for this episode today is Jack Chesnutt. He is an Emmy Award-winning producer from NBC News who now spends his retired time fly fishing in Rocky Mountain rivers, driving classic cars, creating art through photography. This guy also paints. He just kind of does it all and has really been around the block. I really enjoyed sitting down and just learning about Jack today. I wish the conversation would have been longer. Welcome, Jack. Good to have you.
Hey, great to be here, Bobby. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, how's life?
Other than COVID and, all sorts of problems in the streets of America, life for me is pretty good. I'm feeling real happy now.
I got to say I'm kind of enjoying it, too. Not the despair by any means, but I'm enjoying spending time with my kids, my family. I'm enjoying spending more time outdoors than I normally get to, because it seems like the everyday life, you're just in the grind, going from place to place. And this has really freed up a lot of my time, I feel like.
Well, you and a lot of other people. If you go anywhere in Colorado right now on a weekday thinking, oh, I'm going to be out there and nobody's going to be there because it's Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. No. Everybody's out there.
Yeah, no, that is so true. I mean, it's crazy. I drove down Bear Creek Canyon the other day because I had to run to town for something, and I couldn't believe I've never seen that many cars parked along the side of the road. Over the white lines. It wasn't an easy drive. I'll just say that.
Well, yeah, and the attraction is so obvious. I mean, you can go hiking and you can spend time along the creek and mountain biking and fishing. There's so much to do around here. And then, folks their whole working schedule has been changed because of the virus. And, I know people who, normally would be going to the office. No, they're spending 3 or 4 hours, hard hours at home in the morning. And then, I think I'm going to go fishing or I'm going to go ride my mountain bike.
Especially when it's 70 degrees out. Why not,
Pretty hard to pass that up.
Yeah. All right. So I want to get into, you've had an amazing career just from doing my little bit of homework on you. You're an Emmy Award winner, multiple or numerous Emmy Awards. You've also won the Edward R. Morrow Award. Is that correct, too?
Yeah, I won a couple of those. You're embarrassing me here a little bit.
Yeah.
I was in the television news business with NBC News for 33 years, and then I was, working in television as a news reporter and a producer for many years before that. And Brian Gumbel had a great line one time. He said, if you just work hard and show up every day, if you keep at it long enough, you'll get some awards. So
okay.
So I don't want to make too much of the awards. I mean, it's nice to get the recognition.
No, it's great. And
peers.
I think that you should, talk about that a little bit. And I want to know a little bit about that. You've worked with some of the best news anchors in the business, in my opinion. You've been in a lot of different cities and a lot of different situations, national situations, and even some world situations from what I've seen. And I was just kind of curious on your background and kind of how you fell into that and how it all kind of came full circle that you ended up here in Colorado. And can we dive in from the kind of the beginning?
Well, it's weird. Even though I had a whole career as a working journalist. I mean, I started getting paid for writing news stories when I was 17 years old. But I never really wanted to be in the news business. I mean, I got through high school and I went to college, and I was thinking, I'm going to, I don't know, it's like George Costanza, I'll be an architect, or I'll be an English teacher, or I don't know what I was going to be. And my grandfather had gone to the University of Missouri School of Journalism right out of World War I. And he and I were taking a road trip when I was a teenager, and I'd just flunked out of LSU because I partied a lot and studied very little. And he was sort of asking me, well, what's your game plan? And I said, I don't know. I need to get a degree, and maybe I'll write the great American novel. And he said, well, did you ever think about being a reporter? You know how to type? And I said, well, yeah, I do know how to type. And he said, well, maybe you would think about being a reporter and then pay the rent while you write the great American novel. And we kind of laughed about that. But that idea stuck with me. And, even though I'd flunked out, I went to summer school and I studied real hard and I got my grades back up. And I decided that was probably something I might want to give it a shot. But I'd never worked at the high school newspaper or anything like that. I didn't have that background. But my grandfather was such an inspirational guy. I said, well, maybe I can do this. So I applied and got into J school and never looked back. It was weird.
So is J school, is that journalism?
Yeah, journalism
okay.
school. The University of Missouri has, a really good journalism program, and you can earn a degree in journalism, a Bachelor of Journalism degree, and it's one of the only schools where you can do that. But anyway, once I kind of got the bug, I never wrote fiction. Never, ever wrote any fiction because journalism was such an interesting pursuit, and you didn't have to invent characters. You met them every day. And
right.
So that sort of turned into a career. And over time, working in local news, I was fascinated by television initially because it was sort of an ego stroke, going to Safeway and, hey, aren't you on television?
Right.
And my grandmother, my Jackie's on television, So, but I kind of got past that after a few years, and I got into producing. And
well, that was kind of the whole reason why I jumped into the music career, is I wanted to be in the limelight a little bit or work with rock stars and have that lifestyle. And I think that's kind of what gets you into it when you're young, right? Just that it's almost like that dangling carrot, you got to go after it.
Well, yes, and there's some glamour. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you over the years how many interns and high school classes I talked to and college classes even, where the first thing people say to me was, well, I want to be Tom Brokaw, or I want to be Brian Williams, or I want to be Savannah Guthrie, or Jane Pauley, because they see those are the people who are in front of the camera, and they're quite successful. And I always was quick to say, listen, if you want to get into the news business, that's the TV glamour business. If you want to get into the news business, you need to go out and be a reporter, and you need to have some city official lie to you, and then try to call him on it and make a mistake and get calls from viewers and say, or readers who say you screwed up.
We get it a little bit here too.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you need to.
But I get it. Yeah,
you have to go through those things, and then if in the news side, if you're really good at all those things, then maybe you become Tom Brokaw, or maybe you become Brian Williams. But there's only a few. David Muir at ABC. There's only a few at that very top. That top piece of the pyramid is really small. There's there's only one Mick Jagger in the new music business. There's only one Pete Townsend, guitar player, Eric Clapton. So the idea of that's what I aspire to. That's the last 100 feet of that hill is nigh
pretty
onto
steep,
impossible.
yeah.
But there's a lot of interesting, cool things to do if you're not at the pinnacle. And that's I kind of reached that point where I thought, well, am I going to put Tom Brokaw out of a job? Probably not. But I can work with Tom.
Yeah.
And I can work with Brian Gumbel, and I can work with, Brian Williams and Jane Pauley and some really cool people, and work on some really great projects, even if I'm not the one in front of the camera. And luckily for me, I was lucky in a lot of ways, but I got there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you on that.
No,
and
okay.
we were just getting into kind of how you got into journalism. What brought you to Colorado, or how did that all kind of come full circle? I know that you traveled around a little bit and you were in a few different cities here in the States as a producer.
Yeah, and I, particularly when I was working in Los Angeles for NBC, I worked on a lot of stories in the western United States, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, all over, basically west of the Mississippi River. And every time I came to Colorado, I was just sort of wowed, whether it was in the summer or the winter or the fall. It was a wonderful place. And so through a series of sort of funny coincidences and luck, I was able to get NBC to move me to Colorado, and say...
Lucky you.
Yeah, because after living in New York for 11 years and working out of 30 Rock, I was really kind of burned out on city life, and I missed the West. And so I was remembering all those great trips to Colorado. I was remembering the trips that I took my two sons out here, my wife and I, and we came out here and went skiing at Steamboat, and we went rock climbing up at Estes Park in the summertime, and we went camping and hiking. And so when that window came where it was sort of like, well, Jack, what do you want to do with your life now? You're 45 years old. What are you going to do now? Do you want to stay in New York for the rest of your career? And it was really that point. Do I stay in New York for the rest of my career? Or do I see if I can parlay where I am and the success that I'd had at that point and trade that off, make a career choice, and make a life choice, a family choice? And I asked my two sons, I said, well, hey, I've got a chance, we've got a chance. If we want to, we can leave here and we can move to Colorado. And I really thought my two sons, who were at that point in elementary and junior high, I thought they were going to say, oh, no, Dad, we're going to leave school. We leave my friends?
Right.
And there was this moment of silence, and my older son, who I really thought was going to say, I don't want to leave my friends, he said, can we leave this weekend?
They're ready to go, huh?
And I said, well, wait a minute. This is not rock climbing. This is not skiing. You're going to have to go to school. It's going to be colder. And
there are a lot of distractions here. Yeah,
exactly.
But I guess there is in city life too, right? I mean,
but it was great, and I'm so glad we did it. I mean, I ultimately never became a big vice president or president of NBC News, because you have to really be in New York to be on that career track.
Sure.
But I don't miss that a bit. It didn't bother me at all. And I asked recently, got to spend some time with both my sons during the
Do your sons still live here? Or?
No, they actually live in Las Vegas. They both do television production.
Okay.
They do poker shows, and they're about to get fired up for this year's World Series of Poker. And that's in Las Vegas. They're not crazy about living in Las Vegas. They're not big time. They don't go to casinos and stuff and gamble. But on the other hand, that's where the poker television business is. And so they're doing great. But I asked them, I said, look, looking back, do you ever say, geez, I wish we'd stayed in the East Coast. My life would have been different. They would have gone to different colleges. They both went through the CU system. Mm-hmm. My older son wound up graduating from a school in the Midwest. But, I asked them if they had any regrets, and they said no. Not only no, but thank you. Thanks.
That's great. How old were they when you guys made the move from?
Let's see. My younger son was in 4th grade, and my older son was in 8th grade.
So they were pretty young.
Yeah. So they, middle school, right up here at, right here in Evergreen. And they went to Evergreen High School and graduated from here.
Yeah, I grew up here, and, at 18 or 19, this was the worst place in the world. I had to get out of here and go travel the world and, work for rock stars and do all that sort of stuff. And it all kind of came full circle, and that really made me appreciate it moving away, and I couldn't be more grateful that I grew up in such a great spot in the mountains, so.
It's a great mix of everything, and when I retired, my boys were long gone, and we've got, a pretty big house with 4 bedrooms, and it's just my wife and myself and, a couple of dogs. And so, we talked about downsizing and selling, and it's, well, where would we move? Well, we could move to, like everybody else, move to Arizona or something like that, so the winters aren't so rough. And then, this conversation kind of, in bits and pieces, went on for a year, and then 2 years, and then, finally we just said, this is pretty great. I mean, why leave?
Yeah.
I mean, other than the occasional snowstorm in May, when you'd really rather not be getting out the snowblower again, you'd rather be enjoying the flowers.
Well, it just snowed a couple days ago, right?
Really?
It's like June 8th or something like that, and we had snow on the ground. It was beautiful, though, that green grass, and then, it was right at the tree line. I didn't actually get snow at my house because we're a little bit lower in elevation, but, right up the base of Bergen Mountain and some of those spots right there is just green grass and white mountains. Is beautiful.
Yeah, it's wild.
Crazy. So I'm sure with your news career, you've traveled quite a bit, right? Probably been all over the world. I don't know how much you guys did on.
I was never stationed overseas, but I made a lot of foreign trips, for various and sundry reasons. I didn't have the classic foreign producer, foreign correspondent career. I wasn't based in London.
Right.
My friend Greg Dobbs here in town used to work for ABC. He was based in London, covered the Middle East wars and what have you. No, my foreign travel was typically with Brokaw. Tom and I traveled over to Europe with George Bush, the first George Bush, when he was over there for NATO meetings and what have you. And then I covered some stories, in the Somalia situation where had a big revolution, and one of the factions of the revolution decided that to win, they were just going to starve everybody else out. And so they withheld the food, and there was a big problem there, people dying from starvation. And so U.S. sent troops over to free up the food supplies, blah, blah, blah. And so, anyway, I spent, many weeks over there covering that story. But it was always
those are some unusual places to be. That's not some place that you would normally go, on vacation or anything like that. Nobody goes to visit Somalia.
I do not recommend Mogadishu as a
vacation. Was that the Black Hawk Down situation?
The Black Hawk Down incident happened about 9 or 10 months after I left. I was there when the American troops came ashore, which was kind of a funny, weird photo op, because all the American networks and big newspapers all had reporters over there, and we knew where it was going to happen and when it was going to happen, and so it was it was kind of goofy. In the middle of the night, you've got about 80 press people on the beach, and here come the U.S. landing craft, and these soldiers come out of the landing craft and they're total combat gear and their night vision and everything else. Well, the TV people have got these big, portable lights on their cameras, and so they're taking their night vision things off because they're
blind.
blinding them. And but as weird and kind of surreal as that moment was, it got real serious because the U.S. troops, kept moving inland and kept pressuring some of the rebel factions, the families. They are actually clans, and were freeing up more and more of the food supply. And a lot of food had been just stashed in warehouses and was defended by, a bunch of 20-year-olds with AK-47s. so that nobody else could eat the food. Food became kind of almost like a currency. But anyway, as the troops moved in, the country stabilized, and after about Christmas time, I got there 4 weeks before Christmas. Around Christmas time, the feeling was, at least for the news divisions, hey, we've spent a whole lot of money, and the country is fairly stable, as much as it's going to be for the foreseeable future. And so most of the news folks left. Not everybody, but a lot of the news folks left. But Somalia was really a mess for a long time, and our troops stayed and occupied to try to maintain some stability for a long period of time. And that's when the Black Hawk Down incident happened, because, as often happens, military forces that stick around a country longer than they're wanted,
Yeah, they start to get a lot of pushback.
Well, yeah, sooner or later the locals are saying, "Get out of here! We really don't want you here." And in a funny kind of way, we're at that point now with the news media. When there's a big news story, Kobe Bryant. I covered the Kobe Bryant case up in Eagle, and for the first week or so, all these news people who had descended on Eagle, Colorado, to cover the most famous basketball player in the world, arguably maybe one of the most famous athletes in the world. No surprise, there's going to be a bunch of news people in the little town of Eagle.
Right.
So Kobe's coming to court and all this stuff. Well, after about the first week, the good citizens of Eagle had really had it with us. They really wanted us out. We were getting yelled at. Go home.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing here? Get out of here.
And they're ruthless towards you guys, right?
Well, it was not so much then. I think now, at this point in time, the pushback against the media and against news reporters and folks who are there to cover the story, whether it's a demonstration, whether it's something happening in Washington, whether it's whatever it is, the news media has become the focus of a lot of people's serious unhappiness. And I don't think it's justified, but it's happening. And news reporters are getting punched, and camera crews are getting shoved around, and news cars are getting vandalized, and satellite trucks are getting their tires slashed. And it's a tough time for journalism in this country, and I know I didn't come here to tell you what worries me. We came to talk about a lot of light things. But
yeah.
I think right.
No, I think it's good to hear. I think it's good for our listeners to hear a different view.
Well, the news media, journalism, reporting has a very important place in this country, and it has become the whipping child, the whipping post for politicians. And one in particular, he's the guy that lives at, in the White House.
Yeah.
And, when you've got the President of the United States saying that news reporters who are really just doing their job are traitors, and that sort of grants a license to a lot of people who are looking for somebody to dislike. And so why not the media? Why not the reporters? And so Joe Smith, who's out there covering a peaceful, lawful, constitutionally protected demonstration, no looting. He's just out there doing his job, and somebody takes a swing at him because he's just doing his job,
Yeah, that's not right.
That's a big problem, and if our country has all kinds of problems. But the solution is not to kill the messenger. It's probably better to know what's going on, and where are you going to get that? Well, you can't drive around the country saying, I'm going to go to the next 10 demonstrations, and so I'll know.
So I can figure it out.
No, you count on the news media to cover that stuff for you, and you don't go to every city council meeting. You don't go to every Board of Regents meeting, but the news people do that. And they tell you, they put it out there, and they say, okay, look, the CU Board of Regents has just decided they're going to spend, I don't know, I'm making this up. This is totally fiction.
Right.
But let's just say the Regents decide, okay, we're going to make a $50 million improvement to the football stadium over in Boulder. Oh, and by the way, we're going to raise tuition 30%. Now, I'm making this up. But if a news reporter wasn't there and didn't tell you that, you would never know. And so you would not have the opportunity to say, call up your regent or call up your state representative and say, hey, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that's a problem.
And I think a lot of times, too, it's you're there, you're reporting live, right? I mean, you're reporting as it's happening. So maybe you're not getting all the facts. Maybe, I think that's why there's some of the blowback, too, don't you?
Well, the guy who's standing there in the middle of the demonstration, and he's got a camera that's got a little transmitter pack on his back that feeds back pictures on cell phone bands. He knows what's going around 20 feet around him, and the only way he knows what's going on in the city at large is somebody's talking in his ear from the control room. Because guess where they're getting the information? They're getting it off Twitter from the local police department. They're getting it from the AP that's covering, that has more reporters.
And that information's not always right.
Well, that's true. And in the press of the moment, sometimes we'll use these demonstrations as an example. You're on the air. You're on the air live. And if you're a smart reporter, you're only going to report on what you know, what you see, what you can verify yourself. Reporters who decide, oh no, I'm going to tell you about something else that I don't have verified myself, then they're taking some liberties. But that doesn't happen all that often. And I think good reporters, when they make a mistake, good news organizations, when they make a mistake, they say so. The New York Times has a whole section on they don't call it this. We screwed up. Here's what we said.
I screw up on this show all the time.
Well, yeah. and as I say, good reporters who make mistakes, they don't make many.
Yeah.
But when they do, they fess up. I made 2 mistakes in 45 years as a reporter. And
that's pretty good.
I figure that's not a bad batting average. Maybe,
yeah,
maybe that's 98%, why I didn't get fired.
Right?
That's why I didn't get fired. If you make too many mistakes, sooner or later somebody's going to say, why don't you consider, maybe roofing or selling insurance. Get out of this news business. So, but I want to ask you though, as a Colorado native, how do you feel about people? I mean, there's been a huge influx of people moving to Colorado, particularly in the last 5-10 years. And you've seen the changes. I'm one of those people. I mean, admittedly, I came 25 years ago, but I mean, we both have good friends who've moved here within the last 2, 3, 5 years. And Colorado's not the same place.
No, it's not. And I welcome anybody and everybody. My take on it is I just want the people that are moving in to treat it with the same respect that I do. That's all I'm asking. And when I say that, the same respect, I think it's, when you're using public lands and even private land, picking up after yourself, being educated on wildlife and their habitats and what's going on with it. And I think some of that should be pushed back onto Game and Fish and some of the other organizations that are out there. And there are some great organizations out there that are willing to take the time, and they're nonprofit, and they do educate on certain things on how to use the outdoors to where you're not going to damage it. I think Leave No Trace is a great spot for anybody to catch any of that information.
Take only pictures, leave only footprints.
Right. So I think that there's a lot of places to get information. I just think that there's a disconnect there maybe. And, if you grew up in New York City, you're not going to know exactly what you need to do unless you've read up on how to dispose of human waste, for example, when you're in the woods or something like that, or what kind of impacts you have on rivers if you're, like we were talking about on the last podcast, and I don't mean to bring this up again, but you're a fly fisherman as well. if you're fishing to spawning fish and stuff, you're basically ruining the chances for the future to catch any fish, in my opinion. So I think it's just miseducation and or not enough education, maybe lack of education, that people should take it upon themselves, I think, once they move here, if they're going to get into these sports like mountain biking, rock climbing, fishing, fly fishing, hunting, any of that sort of stuff. I think they should really read up on it. And if they don't know something, ask somebody, ask somebody that's been around, or ask Game and Fish. I think that there's a bit of an embarrassment that comes with asking questions sometimes,
Well, I know this is your show and you get to ask the questions, but I'm
glad you asked me.
I have a lot of curiosity that didn't get burned up during my time as a reporter. So I don't mean to turn the tables on you here, but when you say, is it that people should appreciate Colorado more, or is it just learn some of the mechanics of, if you're going to go out and spend time in these pristine areas, this is what you can do to keep them pristine.
Correct.
If you came here for what everything that this state has to offer, and not just cool restaurants in downtown Denver, but the outdoor aspect of this state, the recreational aspect of this state, I agree with you. I think people are obliged to learn and to find out, how do I do this to make it great for everybody, not just for me for this afternoon. Oh, now I'm leaving, and yeah, what the hell, I left some beer cans out there by the water, but somebody else will, whatever. That's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, and it's so easy to lose, what's so cool about this place. And there's so many more people that are out there, which we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's more about preservation of public lands, I think. And I think one thing that kind of blows over everybody's head a little bit is they don't realize that you own that land, I own that land, and they own that land. It's really all of ours to share and take care of, kind of all at the same time. And I know that there's different government agencies that manage that, but it's not their responsibility to pick up after everybody.
Well, and they don't have enough manpower to do that anyway.
Correct. The budgets aren't there.
Yeah, maintaining trails. I mean, I've kind of evolved out of mountain biking, but for a lot of years, I did a lot of mountain biking around here, and the wear and tear on the trails from mountain biking is substantial, and I guess I didn't really notice it while I was doing it. I was new to Colorado, and it's like, holy cow, this is so cool. And it wasn't until the last few times I went mountain biking, I said, wow, these trails are really torn up. And, thank goodness there are volunteer organizations that go out and do trail maintenance. And but that's part of the responsibility, I think. I think we're all responsible for that. And when I go fly fishing, I'm not much of a fly fisherman, kind of a
nor am I.
A newbie.
I've been trying for about 20 years.
I mean, but one of the real joys of fly fishing, for me, because I've always I hadn't been fly fishing very long before I figured it out. If you want to go catch fish, then fly fishing is probably not a great way to do that. Fly fishing is a great way to spend time standing in a river, and as my friend John Garrett, the author, fly fishing author, says, standing in a river waving a stick, which is a pretty great way to spend an afternoon. But if you want fish, go to King Soopers.
Right. Yeah, it definitely you definitely learn patience.
Yeah.
Because just think about your line getting fouled up, or a fly getting fouled up, or you have to change depth on your nymphs, or whatever you're doing. It's a constant change, right? It's a constant art almost.
It is, and it's probably kind of like golf or some of these pastimes that you can never perfect. I kid my friends who are bowlers and say, bowling is so easy, Come on. I mean, you just roll the ball down there and you knock the pins over. I don't know why you don't, shoot a 300 every time, or 200, whatever, 300. But no, it's endlessly difficult, but it is fun at my level, because I'm out there for the water, the trees, the scenery, the quiet, all of those things. And that's why I was asking you about the influx of people. It's changed that. It's changed that equation. And the impact of all these people changes that experience. I think going forward, that's going to be an interesting challenge for Colorado.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, was to raise some awareness about that and kind of to see what we can do maybe collectively. Like, I'm no expert in it, but I plan on having some experts on the show once this COVID-19 thing blows over a little bit more. We have some heavy hitters lined up to come in and talk to us about, what we can do to preserve some of these spots and some of the changes that are going to be coming to Colorado, like I'm reintroducing wolves and that sort of thing. That scares me a little bit.
Why?
Just for the elk population. And, I'm an avid bow hunter, and that's going to affect that tremendously. And, we have a lot of elk running around here.
We have an overpopulation of elk in Evergreen, that's for sure.
Yeah. But with that is going to come wolves. I mean, eventually.
Yeah, wolves are pretty shy. One of the cool things that happened to me when I first moved to Colorado was the reporter for NBC, who was based here in Denver, had sold Brokaw and others in New York on the idea of covering the wolf reintroduction up in Wyoming and in Yellowstone and the Bob Marshall Wilderness nearby. And so no sooner did I land here, 2 days later, I'm up in Yellowstone, and it's,
what a
15
great place,
below zero,
though, huh? Yeah.
And, they are releasing these wolves. And I got to, over the years, because we kept going back to the story, because the initial disputes over reintroduction of wolves, the lines were very clear between the environmentalists who wanted the wolves back because for all the nature reasons, it's the top of the food chain, and without the wolf it's incomplete, blah blah blah. And then on the other side you have cattle ranchers who, they're there for 3, 4, 5 generations, and they see wolves as coming in, and they've got a marginal business operation. It's tough to make a living in the cattle business. They say, how do you make $1 million in the cattle business? Well, you just start with $5 million and just burn off $4 million, and then you got $1 million left. So I understood the opposition, and I understood those who were in favor of it. And so over time, going back up there, what really happened is, the wolves they're shy. They don't want to be around people, and so Evergreen is not going to be a likely wolf habitat.
I agree, but you don't think that we'll have the stray pack that comes in here, or if they run out of a food source where they're relocated, they're going to migrate?
Oh, I think
we've already seen
their food source is going to be cattle. Their food source is, primarily is going to be elk. But if for whatever reason they're not in a place where there's elk, but then look, there's a bunch of
they've already started. We already have wolves in Colorado.
Oh yeah, they've wandered in.
Yeah, they've wandered in from the Wyoming range. So I don't know. I believe that if we're gonna do that, it kind of needs to be across the board. Look at bison. Look at how prevalent they were in the U.S., and I don't know if you know much about the history of them. Mm-hmm. And now they're just down. They're not even wild bison herds really anymore. I think there's one wild bison herd that's a true wild-bred bison, like up somewhere around Montana and into Alaska.
Yeah,
a little bit. I think that those are the only 2 spots left where they're actually not crossbred with cattle and that sort of thing, And
well, interestingly enough, this group of bison right over here off I-70 are pure bison. They are not crossbred. And some of those bison were actually shipped up north to start herds of genetically pure bison. There's also a big herd that was a problem, shall we say, in Yellowstone, because that herd kept wandering off the Yellowstone boundaries into cattle country. And once again, the cattle ranchers said, wait a minute, we can't have this because bison theoretically carry a disease called brucellosis, which causes cattle to miscarry. And so there goes your calf herd. Now, there are scientists who say, no, bison are no more likely to bring brucellosis to a cattle herd than some kangaroo falling out of a plane. But yet, that dispute continues. Well, anyway, there was a whole group of those bison that were shipped up to the Flathead Indian Reservation, northern Montana, and now they roam, quote, free, unquote. But
it's not really free, though. I mean, there's so many fences now.
Well,
it's not like, they don't have the same migration patterns, and I don't think that we'll ever get back to that.
Well, I think
status,
that's the gorilla in the room
Yeah.
in all of these conversations about returning all the native species to where they once were. And I think in an area the size of Yellowstone, which is a national park and has all kinds of protections, yeah, you can make a really good case to have wild wolves roaming in Yellowstone National Park.
Sure.
But on the other hand, free roaming bison, those days are gone. Those days are gone. I'm sorry. Policies were developed to wipe out the bison, to starve the Indians, to push the Native Americans onto reservations. All this history is very well known and very well reported. I'm not just coming in here spouting off something that I made up.
No, I agree with you.
And so is the result.
I study a lot of it.
But, that train moved on. And so civilization moved in. We can't anymore say, oh, you know what, Laramie, Wyoming, you got to go, because we're going to have bison roaming there. I had somebody from American Rivers, which is a great conservation organization, call me up. This was back in the 80s when I was working at Nightly News. And there were all these floods along the Missouri and Mississippi River, devastating floods. And this guy from American Rivers, who I kind of knew, because we'd done a number of stories on endangered rivers and what have you. And he called up and said, look, we want to come on Nightly News, and because we think that the solution to all this flooding is we've got to tear out all of the concrete lining on the Missouri riverbed. We channelize the Missouri River to the point that it's just a lane for barges, and whenever there's a flood, well, it floods all the farmland. And so what we need to do is take out all these channels and let the water spread out. We'll have riparian areas. Birds can live there. Ducks can migrate there. And I said, stop right there. I said, really, come on. You're really telling me that between Omaha, Nebraska, and where the Missouri River joins the Mississippi River, you're going to tear out that whole channel?
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. I think there's a lot to be said for smart ideas to help prevent flooding, and you can create areas where water can overflow and it won't wipe out 500 farmers and destroy millions of dollars worth of crops. There are ways to do this, but the way to do it is not to bulldoze out the entire Missouri River channel and let the water spread wherever it wants to. I said, come on. I said, I'm not going to make you look like a fool, put you on Nightly News and put that idea out there. Come on.
Right.
And he said, well, we really feel strongly. I said, well, then you're going to have to peddle that story someplace else. Goodbye. I'm not going to, we've got only so much airtime. And that, as they say where I grew up, that dog don't hunt.
Yeah. And how often, because you started your news career in about the 70s?
Yeah, I got out.
70?
I graduated from college in 72.
Okay.
And got a job at a local TV station in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But I had worked on a couple of newspapers, part-time kind of stuff before that. But and earned a paycheck. But it wasn't, my real career started 3 weeks after I graduated from college.
And how often in your career did you see conservation come up, or situations like that where somebody was trying to make it, or maybe the networks actually took it on and helped with certain agendas?
I've always felt strongly about doing stories about the ecology, conservation, the environment. I'm that age.
Yeah.
Come on, Earth Day was invented, about the time I got out of college, and so, that's always been part of, what I'm interested in, and so, as journalists tend to gravitate towards stories that they're interested in. I didn't have a whole lot of interest in stories about the stock market, so I didn't go into business news, but I did do a lot of stories over the years, including, the incursion of salt water into the wetlands and the swamps in southern Louisiana. When I was working in Baton Rouge, the drilling industries, they cut channels through the swamp so they could get to their drilling rigs. Duh. Yeah, that's what you do. You don't want to have to take your tugboat with drilling supplies and pipe on a 50-mile route all through a swamp when you can bring in a giant auger and cut yourself a 4-mile channel, and you get your pipe out there. You can do pipe deliveries and food you can do all this stuff 5 times a day. Yeah, but what happened was the Gulf of Mexico water, instead of sort of having this dense filter of tree roots and mud and everything else to keep the salt from coming far inland, suddenly they've got these channels that bring salt water right into the swamp. Well, these giant 400-year-old trees are dying. Basically the Atchafalaya Basin, as it's called, that giant swamp between Baton Rouge and the Texas line, a lot of that died because of the drilling industry. And that was a trade-off that the people of Louisiana and the governor of Louisiana, everybody was fully in favor of. And if you were one of those swamp people who said, wait a minute, this is killing my place where I go duck hunting. This is killing the place where I go shrimping,
Right.
Shrimpers, tough luck, But there's an argument on each side of the story. There's an economic argument in favor of it. There's a preservation argument on the other side. And both sides have a voice at the table. And that's always the way I try to cover those stories, is because people who have, this country has an economy, the oil and gas industry has a seat at the table. Maybe it's too big a seat. Maybe they can buy too many politicians with their contributions. You can make that case if you want to. All I'm saying is that over the years, as a reporter, I wanted to hear all sides. And believe me, the people in the oil and gas business didn't like it when I went down and talked to Joe, who had a shack out in the swamp, and suddenly, the ducks that he had hunted, the fish that he used to fish for, the shrimp that he used to fish for, were gone. And so suddenly this guy he can't maintain himself anymore.
Yeah.
And so the oil and gas people say, well, why do you talk to him? I mean, he's just an old swamp rat.
Well, those are the guys that are seeing it firsthand.
Yeah, he's got a life. He's got an opinion that's worth listening to. You guys, drive around in Mercedes and, make a good living drilling for oil and selling the oil. You're on the air, but so's Joe. And so that's and over time you hope that the audience, when they hear both sides, they can make up their own mind. They can say, you know what, we need the gas. So tough, Joe. On the other hand, people may say, you know what, that swamp, that Atchafalaya Basin is worth preserving. And that, guess what, that fight's still going 45, 50 years later.
That's crazy. I mean, I think that's my biggest fear here, is that we get into some of those sort of battles and nothing really ever gets resolved, or there's not a way to make both sides of the party happy, right?
Yeah. And I think if you're a smart governor, or if you're a smart, head of the Natural Resources Commission or something like that, the way to do business is to get everybody together in the same room and say, okay. And I'm not here to
lock them in there until they figure it out.
I'm not here to make a case for John Hickenlooper, but I covered Hickenlooper and I saw how he did business, and there are a lot of people who are very strong environmentalists who say that Hickenlooper sold out to the gas and oil people, and there's a lot of gas and oil people that say this guy is hard to deal with. We had to bend, we had to do all these expensive things, problems. Government interference with our industry. Well, you know what? I think if everybody sits down in the same room, something is worked out before they leave the room. Everybody walks out. Nobody's 100% happy. I think that's good government. I think that's how we move ahead. How we don't move ahead is if we have people pointing the finger and screaming at the other side, and there's no coming into a room and saying, okay, we can't leave this room until we come up with
resolved. Yeah.
John, and again, I've got all kinds of reasons not to get involved in politics on this show, but on the other hand, I do want to say, and Hickenlooper did the same thing on marijuana. He opposed legalized marijuana, and he campaigned against legalizing marijuana. The voters voted to say, we want recreational marijuana in Colorado. The first thing John Hickenlooper did was bring everybody together and say, okay, we got to regulate it. We got to figure out how we're going to tax it. We got to decide how we're going to spend that tax money. We got to protect kids from getting into marijuana, just like we got to protect kids from getting into booze and cigarettes. He was morally opposed to having marijuana legalized, but he said, okay, this is now we got to make it work. So I think
that that's 99% of the battle really is, if something does get voted in or doesn't go your way, then, I think it's figuring out how to make it work.
Yeah, and not walking away and saying, screw all of you guys.
Right.
It didn't come out my way.
And I think that happens with a ton of conservation issues, Well,
and I think it's happening with a ton of issues over and beyond conservation.
I agree.
I think that one of the things I've seen covering politics in the last 20, 30 years is that more and more and more the divide becomes so divisive, that nobody's able to sit down and say, all right, we really got to, we've disagreed. We really got to do something now. We can't just not do things.
Yeah, because stuff just becomes stagnant,
Yeah, but that's, I guess, if I was going to come on your show and talk about worries, after all these years of covering all these issues, I'm not seeing people coming together on so many of these issues. Yeah. It's just a big fight. It's a food fight.
I do value your opinion though, because you've seen, 40 years of experience or 35 years of experience, right, in the news industry, and how much you've seen. And
well, let's talk about the wolves.
Yeah,
the wolf thing. There are some people who say, oh, well, it was a bad idea because cattle are still being taken by wolves. And but on the other hand, there are people in the environmental groups who say, no, we haven't even come close to reintroducing all these species, including wolves, because, for instance, Colorado is, and it's going to go on a ballot. It's going to become a ballot issue. We're all going to get to vote on whether to have wolves or not. I don't know that that's such a great idea. I'm not a naturalist.
That's what scares me about it.
Yeah,
to be honest with you,
everybody gets to step up and say, "Oh, wolves, they're cool," or "Wolves, oh, they're not." Why is this on the ballot? I don't know. Anyway, leave that aside. But what happened with the wolf thing, though, is that accommodations eventually were made. the World Wildlife Fund and other conservation groups finally said, you know what, you cattle ranchers have a point, so we're going to reimburse you. And so these private organizations, nonprofits, reimburse cattlemen for their lost, if they lose a calf or if they lose a cow. And, there's a proof. There's, the ranchers say, oh, I got to take all these pictures and I got to fill out all these forms and what have you. Well, they still get a check for $1,200, $1,500, $1,800 to pay them back for that loss. And that loss was from a wolf. So accommodations, get made. Things get done.
I think there's a lot more impact, though, than just cattle ranching. Don't you agree? I mean, the impacts that it's going to have on – we have this influx of people moving here, right?
Yeah.
So our suburbs are expanding and moving into some of those areas where they're talking about reintroducing wolves eventually.
We've got,
so we're going to have a mix.
How many 100,000 visitors are there to Yellowstone every year? How many people have been bitten by a wolf? How many people have tried and not even seen a wolf?
Yeah.
I made 7 trips to Yellowstone, and the only time I could see a wolf that was less than 4 miles away from me.
I'm not saying
was
that
the day they let him out of the cage.
Sure.
And then when they recovered a couple of wolves, that died, that were. They just died.
And I'm not saying that. I'm not fearful of them attacking people. I don't think. I mean, that could be an issue. I don't know. We haven't seen that happen yet.
Well, I think you're going to get your neighbor's cat or your dog.
No, I'm worried about the elk population.
Oh,
for the most part.
Well, I won't come on here and pretend to be a wildlife expert.
Nor am I.
But I think it'd be a great idea if you had someone come on and talk about the balance with elk. I do know that at Rocky Mountain National Park, they had a real problem, and that's why Rocky Mountain National Park instituted an elk hunt, because the elk were eating so much of the growth around the streams that erosion had become a problem. And the streams weren't healthy, and the wildlife in those wetlands near the streams was out of balance, and so they had, that's how elk populations are controlled.
Game and Fish is very good at managing that, and they've got the state broken up into different areas, and I don't think that this is just a Colorado issue. I think that this is the whole Rocky Mountain range, or anywhere else in any other sort of habitats where they're talking about reintroducing animals that have maybe been, it could be anything.
Well, the wolf is it's the hot button.
Yeah,
issue.
It's the subject now, for sure.
Because, we all grew up fearing that wolves were going to, come get you in the night, and, goodness knows they ate all those kids and all those fables back, all those German fables. But I do think that the trade-off will be that wolves will eventually get here. It's just a question of will they officially be here, or will they be kind of hanging out like they are now.
I mean, we have large predators here now. We have mountain lions. We have stuff like that. But how often do you see them? I mean, they're so stealth. It's incredible. I mean, I grew up here my entire life, and I've only seen 1 or 2 in the wild, and they were from a distance. So it's.
Oh yeah, and I saw a bobcat in my neighbor's yard the other day, and if people are worried about their pets, I guarantee you that bobcat, which probably weighed 18 or 20 pounds, would take on any 100-pound dog and win. So. Those types of threats are kind of here. We've moved into their space. We've moved into elk country. If you live in Evergreen, Colorado, you have elk in your yard. I have elk in my yard regularly.
Yeah.
And when they're bugling, and it's crazy. I mean, when we first moved here, I woke up in the middle of the night. I thought somebody was being strangled, down the hill from my house, and it was like, oh,
yeah, they do make an eerie sound.
Yeah,
but man, it's cool.
It is totally cool.
Yeah.
But that's, we're in their space, and it's. I'll be looking forward to your podcast when you bring the elk and wolf experts on, because I
want to hear both sides of the story too. I'm not. I have my own beliefs, but that doesn't mean that they're everybody else's, and I want to share as much as we can, or as much education as we can on both sides of the fence. That's my goal.
Yeah,
and let people make their own decisions.
Absolutely. So what else? What else is on the hit list
here?
So I
gotta ask you. You were in New York, and were you in New York around 9/11 or when that happened? And did you cover some of that?
Coincidentally, I was in the Minneapolis airport, getting ready to get on a flight to Canada to do a story on Canadian prescription drugs and how cheap they are compared to the same drugs in the United States. We all know the story. But that was back in the, when that was not that was a news story in those days. So anyway, I'm about to board this flight with a reporter who's based in Chicago. And we were looking at a news kiosk in the airport with a television on. And there's all these people standing around. And I said, well, what are they looking at? So I kind of went over and looked. And I saw the second plane hit the World Trade Center, which definitely sort of took the wind out of my sails.
And was your family right in the city when that was all going on, or?
No, we had moved out to the suburbs at that point. So we were not in. We had lived when we first moved to New York. We lived in Brooklyn with a view of the World Trade Center. But no, my family was out of the city. But my reporter and I, we were going to meet the camera crew in Canada, and we called the home office, and the home office said, get in a car and start driving, because we don't think the planes are going to be flying for at least 24 hours. Well, we all know it was longer than that.
Yeah.
But in any case, right at that particular moment, my assignment desk in New York said, we need you here. It's a big story. Needless to say, get yourself to New York. So I basically, along with another reporter and a camera crew and an associate producer, we caravan and drove straight through to New York, to Midtown Manhattan, parked in the parking garage near 30 Rock, went up to the office and said, we're here to work. And I was there for the next 3 weeks. And it was you have a few experiences in life that are that really affect you, and that one certainly did.
Yeah, that was a hard one for sure.
Yeah, and it took me a few hours once I got there, because I really felt like, why are all my friends and stuff, they're like they're walking around like zombies. And it was all these people who lived in the city, a lot of them lived down near the impact zone. It was less of a visceral effect on me. I didn't know anybody who was killed, but I know a lot of people who had family and friends who were killed. In the investment firms in the World Trade Center and what have you. And so that's why all these people were still working. They're in the news business. This is the big story. You're there, you got to work. But then their foundations had been shaken. Mine too, but not in the same way. Not personal.
Not firsthand, yeah.
It was like, wow, our country has been attacked, and all the things that a lot of people felt, most of us felt, all over the country. But these were folks who, this was, all the things that they sort of had taken for granted, that you could get on the subway and you could get from one end of the city to the other, that you wanted to, excuse me, that when you walked outside, you might have some exhaust fumes, but you weren't going to smell the smell of dead people.
Yeah.
Wafting up from lower Manhattan. So I equated it, and it took me a while to sort of put it together. What am I witnessing here? What am I part of? And mostly, what am I seeing in other people? And to a lesser extent to myself. And I think that, if you own a boat and you keep your boat in the harbor, and at the end of your boat ride, you come back to the harbor and you hook your boat to this mooring. It's 1,000 pounds of concrete on the bottom of the bay. It's got a giant chain on it, and at the top, you hook your boat to that mooring. And you know that anything short of a Class 5 hurricane, when you come back, your boat's going to be there. And these people, their moorings were torn away.
Yeah.
And the things that so much of what you sort of count on every day to get through the day, all of that had been just jerked out from under them. And that, that's, and to a certain extent, that's why I stayed as long as I did, staying in the city, stayed in a hotel, didn't see my family, because, that's what you do. You're in the news business. You're covering the biggest story of your life, and there's no, there's no turning away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine that was not an easy task by any means. And, I got to say the memorial that they built is just amazing. I don't know if you've visited it since it's been done in the museum, and I've gone several times just in the few times that I've been working in the city, and what an amazing spot. I urge anybody that's in the city to take the time to go check that out.
I think emotionally it has the same impact of going, for people my age, to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And it sobers you. I mean, you might be there on a trip or a vacation, and where are we going to dinner tonight, and da-da-da-da-da, and then you go, and then it's not like you go inside a building so much. It's just you are on sort of hallowed ground, and the Vietnam Memorial, that's not where the war was fought, but that's where all the names are. You're surrounded.
It's another amazing memorial for sure.
Yeah. And it's we won't have a coronavirus memorial,
right?
But I think we're all going to be very aware of how our lives changed in this country, probably around the 15th of March.
Yeah.
I think we can all sort of look back to between the 12th and the 20th of March. There was a 1 week period there where the NBA said, we ain't playing. Baseball said, hold off on spring training. Where airlines said, wait a minute, before you come to the airport, you got to have a mask, all this stuff. Golf tournaments were like, oh, wait a minute.
Everything
worldwide changed.
Yeah.
And I'm mostly talking about this country. Yeah. I think things changed in Italy before they changed here.
Yeah.
And so, this is, to put it in news terms, I'm not covering this one.
Right.
It's weird to sit this one out.
Do you miss that now? How long have you been retired?
5 years.
5 years, yeah. Do you miss?
My last big story was the theater shooting out in Aurora, and I covered the trial of the guy who pulled the trigger. And, that was, I covered that one from the night it happened until he was sentenced to life without parole. And that was, there was a lot of stuff in between.
Yeah,
but
ton.
That was a big story, certainly for this part of the country. And it was a big national story, but it was a really big story here because having gone through Columbine, to have another big mass murder like that right here in our little town of Denver, is pretty rugged.
Yeah, it does. Hits home hard. So Now that we've got all the doom and gloom out of the way,
we've lost all the listeners.
No, it's
they all
great
said,
though.
"Oh God, this guy,"
No. It's great though because I wanted to hear. I can only imagine what you went through in your career, and I think that you had an outstanding career, and to have a career that long in that line of work, I think is pretty unusual, wouldn't it be?
Well, a lot of people, you get the bug, and you want to stick with it, and I mean, a lot of folks move out. It's like news, that's not for me, or I'll go into public relations, or there's a lot of related fields. But I think it's not unusual, and I have a lot of friends who find it harder to retire than I did. I really felt like, because luckily I got to mentor a lot of young people within NBC. I mentored Don Lemon. Okay.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah. I was assigned to work with Don for 5 weeks when he first came to NBC Network from our local station in Philadelphia. And so I worked with Don every day on doing stories for the Today Show and Nightly News to sort of get him up to speed. Local news is one breed of cat, but the network, it's the major leagues in our business anyway, and the expectations are really high. And Don was a new guy, and so I did that. Me and several other sort of senior producers worked with new correspondents a lot. I worked with Tom Costello. That was really cool. Tom was a reporter at Channel 9 here.
Yeah.
And then he subsequently worked at CNBC. And NBC Network News was thinking, Tom is interested in shifting over to news from CNBC, from business news. So we'll send him out to Colorado and work with Jack, for a month or so. And so Tom and I had a great time. Tom, having worked at Channel 9, Tom had great sources here. Tom knew the country. He knew the crazy weather. So, unlike working with some folks who come jetting in here from Atlanta and say, "Hey, let's go do a story on avalanches, and let's put on the climbing skins and climb up Guanella Pass with an avalanche training crew." And I said to this guy from Atlanta, I said, "Why don't you need to spend a little time here before we go up to 13,000 feet,
right,
and work our asses off." "Oh, no, I run marathons. I'm a tough guy." This guy was on his hands and knees in 15 minutes up on the pass, and the whole avalanche training team is looking at me and looking at the cameraman, and we're from here, and this reporter is throwing up,
Right. Yeah.
So anyway,
altitude's no joke.
Oh, it is.
And the weather's no joke here. I mean,
it'll whack you hard. But to get back to your point about, once I retired, I did a little writing. I like old sports cars. So I did a little writing. I did some photography and submitted some things and got a few things published. But it occurred to me pretty quickly that I don't need to keep turning that wheel.
Sure.
I don't need to keep being a reporter. It's kind of fun not being a reporter. It's kind of fun, to be honest, kind of a news critic myself. I'm like everybody else. I can't believe that reporter just said that. What's wrong with that guy? It's like, yeah.
So let's talk mountain life a little bit. You're a fly fisherman. You spend a lot of time in the river.
Living here in Evergreen is an absolute blessing because, as we talked about, within 5 minutes of my house, there are trout. There are little brown trout. There are rainbow trout. There's a perfectly fine creek to walk in where you can stand in the water and wave that fiberglass stick, that carbon fiber stick, and try to catch a fish. It's an interesting thing, I relate it to finding a new chapter, because I had a chapter that lasted 45 years, and then it's like, well, okay, I'm not just going to sit around the house, what else is there to do? What else can I, and my son asked me, when I retired. He says, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I'm going to play some more golf. He goes, that's impossible. You can't play any more golf than you already play.
Are you a big golfer too?
Well, I do play golf.
Yeah.
But I said, no, it is possible to play more golf. It is possible. So I played a little more golf. But I took up the fly fishing because, as several friends told me, they said, Jack, you'd be an idiot if you live here and you don't fly fish. And I said, and I resisted that for a year or more. And finally, this guy who has a drift boat and he's a lifelong fisherman, he's an excellent fisherman. He said, "Come on, take up this sport, and I'll take the drift boat. We'll go down to Colorado, below Kremling, down, so I said, okay, all right. So now unfortunately,
now you're hooked, huh?
I'm hooked bad, to the point where during the COVID home orders, I'm hanging around with my granddaughter and trying to entertain her because she's not in school. She's 3 years old. And 3-year-olds are a full-time job. I will salute every mother who's listening to this podcast. Keeping up with a 3-year-old, you have to be tough. You've got to be an Olympic
I agree.
Parent
it's
to keep
constant.
up with a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to entertain her. And so she's got these watercolors. And I said, okay, Eiley, you do you paint something for me. Paint a dinosaur or a cat, And she said, well, you do one too. So I was under orders to paint while she was painting.
Right.
And so we were at the kitchen table side by side. And I got to painting fish. And so my line now is, if you can't catch fish, paint them. So I took up.
I know. I was cracking up when he sent me that in a message the other day. I was laughing. I was like, "That's great!" And it's amazing. You just got commissioned, right?
Well, I got like every old geezer on Facebook. What do you do when you're locked at home for weeks? You go to social media, you keep up with your friends. What are your friends doing? Well, they're hanging out, they're cooking, they're getting tired of their own cooking, getting tired of looking at their wives, whatever, And so, I started putting these paintings on Facebook saying, look, this is what I did today. I didn't go to the grocery store. Excuse me. I didn't go for a big bike ride. I sat here and painted this, and I got a lot of encouragement, And my wife said, "Yeah, but your friends they'll say they'll
right.
encourage you, You're, don't."
No, I think they're really good.
Don't let it go to your head. But I sort of kept at it, and so a couple of people said, "Hey, I really like that," on Facebook. They said, "Can I buy that?" I was like, no, I don't. I'm not selling this stuff. My mother's an artist. She was a very good artist. She's brilliant. Had a career as a commercial artist, but she does fine art as well. And I felt, it's like, I can't believe people were wanting to buy.
I think they're great.
This stuff. So,
hey, Jeremy, are you back there?
3 weeks later,
yeah.
Somebody finally said, "Look, I really want you to do this, and I'll pay you. Just tell me how much." And I said, "Okay, here's the deal. I won't accept any money. But if I'm gonna paint you a fish, you have to tell me a fish story. I'm just painting a fish. I'm a story guy. I've been a story guy for my entire career. So she said, all right. My dad used to go fishing in Nova Scotia every year, and he'd fish for Atlantic salmon. And I don't have my dad anymore. But that's one of my great memories of my dad. He'd come home and he'd tell us these great fishing stories, and he'd brought home salmon, and we'd eat salmon until we were tired of salmon. But she said that's one of my memories of my dad. So I painted her an Atlantic salmon.
Oh, nice.
And sent it to her. And
are these all up on Facebook for us to see? Can Jeremy pull some of them up?
Oh, they're on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
But and then. Another friend of mine out in California said, "Hey, I want you to paint me a Chinook salmon." And I said, "Why?" He said, well, when I came back from Vietnam, I was hurt, and I was sent to Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. And he said the first normal thing I did, once I got back in the States, got my feet on the ground in the United States, first normal thing I did, I went fishing with 2 buddies, and I caught this salmon, and we ate that salmon for 3 or 4 days, and we didn't have to eat chow hall food. We didn't have to eat from the mess,
Sure.
And he said, I still think about that salmon. And I said, so I painted him a salmon. I sent it to him, and he asked me to, and so I sketched. The goofy thing is, these salmon, the male salmon, they look like some kind of monster when they're spawning.
They got the big old hook jaws and all the crazy
they got this
teeth.
mouth that looks like some sort of a prehistoric bird or something. And so I had sketched it, and I was about to paint it, and I thought, oh my God, what if he didn't catch a male?
Yeah.
Because he said it was a spawning salmon. So I sent him a quick email. I said, was this fish all red with a big hook jaw, or was it mostly red but with a lot of green and a normal-looking jaw, male or female? And he sent me an email right back. It was a female. It's like, so I took this sketch that I'd spent
it was the wrong one,
on.
huh? Yeah.
It's like wrong
Damn it.
fish, right fish, wrong sex.
Yeah.
So I went and I did a female one for him, and I inscribed it. I said, Jack's Welcome Home Salmon.
Nice.
And sent it to him. So, no, this is not a.
But you're enjoying that, yeah?
Yeah, this is not a money-making thing. This is a
Sure.
fun thing, and doing it for friends and folks who, there's something in their lives that fish, come on.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's important to them. So it's like, yeah, I can do that. It gives me something to do. It keeps me out of the bars.
Sure.
Keeps me occupied. My wife won't trip over me.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a nap. I'm working away on these fish pictures. So
that's awesome. I think that this whole COVID thing, I think that's one of the positive things about it is it's brought out so much creativity.
Well, yeah, and it's another, as I said earlier, it's a new chapter.
Sure.
We all I think we're kind of like humans are like sharks. If we don't keep moving, then you expire. So you have to keep moving, and it's like what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And there's no age limit on that. I mean, hell, I'm going to be 70 in August, and I took up golf at 50. I took up fly fishing at 68.
Yeah.
I took up watercoloring at 69 and a half. It's.
But it's great that it came from a 3-year-old too. Like that's what spurred it. It's great.
Yeah.
What do you still travel quite a bit for fun or for leisure or anything like that? Or
well, yeah, it's funny. Right after I retired, my wife said, "Where should we go?" And I said, I want to stay home, just for a while.
Yeah.
I love Colorado. I love being here year-round. This is a great place. And I spent a lot of time on airplanes. Spent a lot of time in hotels. I've got a lot of hotel points. I've got a lot of airline points. But I didn't want to spend them right away. I wanted to just kind of
decompress, maybe, huh?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, it was decompression. It was also, I really didn't want to get in the car and drive to DIA. I mean, that was I was doing that weekly, going someplace, shot out of a cannon, as we say in the news business. Well, where are you this week? Well, I'm in Washington State. There was a mudslide, and it wiped out 16 homes and killed 30 people. And I flew in at midnight, and I worked 20 hours a day for 4 days, and I'm finally getting some sleep, and I'll be home next week or the week after. So the notion of not running red lights to get to the airport was very appealing to me. But now, my wife and I just got back from a fishing trip to southwestern Montana.
Oh, awesome.
We fished the Beaverhead and the Big Hole rivers and caught a bunch of trout and released all of them. But my wife it was more frustrated than me over not catching enough fish when we just go out to Bear Creek or we go up to the Blue or around here. So this was an opportunity. First time she'd been with a guide in a drift boat in a place where the fish are plentiful, and the guide, wonderful guy, wonderful, terrific Montana native, he's, here, we're going to use this bug and we're going to use at this depth and cast it right over there. And my wife cast it over there, and day after day we caught fish after fish. So now I'm actually painting a couple that we caught. She caught every species of fish in the Big Hole River.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I don't mean to bore the non-fishermen in the audience, but she caught a grayling, she caught a whitefish, she caught a brown trout, she caught a rainbow trout, and she caught a cutthroat. All of them in one day.
Really?
And
that's a good day.
yeah, decent. Well, she caught a lot more fish than that, but she caught all the species. So as the guide said, you hit for the cycle.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So I am now painting a brook trout, a brown trout, a rainbow trout. I'm doing her Big Hole River series.
Awesome. That's cool how it translates too. That's really great. I know that you're into classic cars.
Yeah, guilty.
Yeah. And I know that Jeremy and you take a drive occasionally together, and that's kind of how we connected.
Yeah, every now and then. Jeremy travels a lot, and so he's not here enough to drive his car, his ancient. These are ancient Porsche.
They're classic.
Yeah, they're
classic Porsches.
Well, they're
ancient jackets as old as I am.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I won't even. You already know how old I am. But yeah, they're old cars. They don't have digital this and digital that and a plug-in cube to make sure that your shifts are perfect. You're doing it by hand. It's kind of the difference between walking into a grocery store and buying a loaf of Wonder Bread, which is a brand new Toyota or Honda, and it's perfectly good bread, and they're perfectly good cars, or, some kind of weird homemade sourdough bread.
Sure.
I mean, it's
baked at altitude.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, driving these cars it's very involving, and it's fun, and again, it's sort of like, where do you live? Well, I live in the greatest trout fishing place perhaps in the United States, other than maybe the Great Northwest. But I also live in a place where the great roads to drive a little sports car. And it's, this is not, Jeremy and I do not have these rocket ships that go 200 miles an hour. These are basically old, kind of like a Volkswagen. They're air-cooled, they're noisy, they smell like gasoline and exhaust fumes, and I'm sure it would be an acquired taste, for most people. It's like fly fishing.
Kind of sounds like the bike world a little bit. Like, it's almost like that Harley nostalgia a little bit, right? Like there's something about getting in one of those cars. And I did a podcast with Jeremy. I don't know if you've listened to that.
I should.
But we got into it pretty good and heavy. And he was talking about, I'll let Jeremy talk about it actually, because we haven't heard much from him on the show. But he was talking about the smell that an air-cooled car has, like a Bug or a Porsche or something along those lines,
Oh, it's distinctive. Man behind the curtain.
No, it totally is. I guess the last time that I was ever in a Beetle was when I was a kid, maybe like 12 years old, and then I went and I got in this, and it was the first air-cooled Porsche I'd ever been in, and I got it and I went, oh my God, it smells like my dad's old Bug.
Yeah, my dad had a Bug too.
That's what it reminds me of,
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But you don't forget that smell. But what's really cool is Jack and I will go out and, 10 minutes away or just killer roads, and we don't get in trouble like some of the new guys do. We get like thumbs up and stuff because you're in a cool old car and you're not doing 100 miles an hour down through like where people live. you're kind of keeping it tame. It feels like you're going real fast because they're loud and it's low to the ground and it doesn't have all the stability control and you can't go all as fast as some of these other guys and newer stuff. So it keeps you out of trouble a little bit.
Yeah, I've got a Honda to just get around, go grocery shopping, go to the golf course, whatever. And that car is literally faster than this old Porsche.
Right.
If you stomped on the gas, the Honda is faster. But it's
my 4Runner's almost faster than that.
But it's not fun.
It's not.
It's
fun
part
at
of
all.
shifting the
It's
gears,
not fun
right, and working the clutch and all that fun sort of stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Especially on some of these 2-lane mountain roads, like if you're doing 103 or any of those, are pretty amazing. Going up Squaw Pass or whatever that is right there.
Yeah, and like Jeremy says, the new super sports cars, they don't really feel fast until you're go to jail fast.
Right.
And these older cars, you can drive the speed limit and feel like you're really just.
You got to hang on to the wheel, right?
You're boogieing. Hey, look at this. I'm going 50. I'm going 60.
Yeah.
Whoa. They will go fast enough that you can get a ticket. But on the other hand, it's a sensation of speed. And I think your parallel with the old Harley, think in terms of a 1973 Harley Sportster as opposed to a brand new BMW silent thing that'll,
Well, even the new Harleys have cruise control and all this sort of stuff, and I'm kind of that old school era, I guess, when it comes to it. But yeah, that I saw. Do you own a Morgan?
No.
I saw it on your Instagram page, and that's one car that's always intrigued me, just because it's a V-twin motor in the front, and you got the single wheel in the back, and it just looks like the cockpit of an old P fighter plane or whatever, from the World War II era.
P-51, yeah.
Yeah.
They
so awesome.
That was.
There it is, right there.
I kind of got into car photography after I retired, and because they're beautiful. I mean, they're not only interesting pieces of engineering, but I think the old.
Is that your Porsche right there too? The white one?
Yeah, the white one. Yeah, it's. Nice. I think it's like a year. It's only a year. I think Jeremy's and mine are within a year or two of each other.
Yeah, you're in 81, aren't you?
81 or 82.
Yeah. I mean, 80.
It's been so long since I looked at my registration. But cars, and I think it's because I grew up in the Midwest, in a little town in the Midwest, and again, a driver's license was a really big deal because it was freedom, because it was like, I'm not at home.
Yeah.
I'm not riding my bicycle.
I'm going to go pick up chicks.
Yeah, I can go on a date. I can go to the drive-in movie, and we can go for a cruise. And, a car was freedom. And so, there were some guys in my little high school. There were 500 people in my high school. A couple of guys, one guy had a Corvette, another guy had a Roadrunner. Actually, it was before Roadrunners existed. He had a Plymouth Satellite with a 383 engine with a 4-barrel. And I won't go too deep into car talk here. But, those guys had cool cars. I had a Volkswagen. That was my how do you get around when you're a senior in high school? I had a Volkswagen. I had a good buddy who had a Peugeot. And the running joke about Peugeots is no one ever buys one. They always inherit it from an aunt. The car guys on NPR, that was always their line. And it's true. He inherited it from his aunt.
What is a Peugeot?
It's a French car, and he was always very proud of the fact that it was a Hemi. It had a Hemi head engine, but it was 4 cylinders, and it might have had 80 horsepower. But anyway, my buddy Herb had a Peugeot. I had a Volkswagen. Another buddy had a Rambler. We were not cool car guys. We had funky, not cool cars.
Right.
And so, but cars were so much of a part of that time, and it's an old cliche that the car you really want as you get older, and you can actually afford one, was the coolest car that the coolest guy had in high school.
Yeah.
And so under that rule, I should have bought, a 1967 Corvette, because one guy had that 67 Corvette, and it was really cool. But for some reason, I just kind of stayed with the not so much because but it was German, but it was that sort of clackety, air-cooled engine in the rear kind of a thing.
Is a Peugeot, does that have an engine in the rear, or is it air-cooled?
Herb's was a front engine car. It was kind of a tank, but it had not only a big front seat, but it had a big back seat. And so if we had a potential for a hot double date, we would take the Peugeot, not because it was a chick-mobile, but it was the architecture was very good for double dating compared to a Volkswagen.
Have you ever seen any of the French motorcycles from I think it's probably from 1940 to 1950-ish, somewhere in there? The Mars, M-A-R-S.
That sounds familiar.
They are incredible. I mean, I first ran into it at the Barber Museum, and I've brought this up on the podcast before. Have you ever been there in Birmingham?
I have not.
You got to make a trip. It's amazing. It's a motorcycle museum.
Wow.
But they have a lot of car stuff there, too, and a lot of air-cooled car stuff.
Oh,
they got a bunch of...
It was close. I was thinking, why would I go to a motorcycle museum? But when you told me that there were cool cars there and air-cooled cars, I was like, okay, all right, I could go to Birmingham.
Yeah. They have a whole Porsche racing experience outside of the Barber Museum. But this thing is crazy. It's got a spare tire. It's got an air pump. The shifter for it is down kind of right in between your legs, right where the seat's at. So I could imagine what it would look like while you're riding around on this thing.
Aren't the old Harleys? I mean, the really old Harleys.
They kind of had a shifter off to the side.
Oh, okay.
This one is literally right at your crotch, pretty much. So
you don't want to.
It's that French experience.
Don't grab the wrong stick, right?
You want to watch out for those collisions. It might throw you forward.
Look at how this body is, though. That's kind of got like a Citroen kind of vibe to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're crazy. But that's a great museum. If you ever get the chance or you find yourself in Birmingham, it's just outside of it. It's kind of out by, what's the racetrack there? I'm not a NASCAR guy. Is it Talladega?
Yeah, I'm not a NASCAR guy either. But every city over 200,000 down there has a racetrack.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure. I mean, my buddy Herb, who had the Peugeot, Peugeot also was. They were into they made bicycles before internal combustion engines.
Okay.
They became along, and so Peugeot, and continued to make. I don't know if they still do, but they made really good, bicycles. During that same time, they got into cars, obviously, to broaden their customer base. But the French, Renault, Peugeot, Citroën, I think it's like a lot of things that the French did. I'm going to get in trouble here, but they were really quirky, eclectic, kind of weird kind of stuff.
They didn't fit the mold, and I think that's what's kind of intriguing about it, though. It's just like the different ingenuity and stuff that went into their car engineering or automobile engineering or even motorcycle engineering.
Well, and their stuff didn't, the French designs didn't look like the British designs.
No.
And it didn't look like the American designs. And, the Russian cars and stuff like that, they look kind of like tanks.
Right.
And, Eastern European stuff, there was all kind of that communist.
Is that a Peugeot there?
That is a Citroën.
Oh, okay.
And these things had Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't this one have an air suspension?
That was all hydraulic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's all this, there's just green
So it was
fluid.
way before its time, like... It would have fit right in East LA then.
Lowrider.
Right?
Yeah. It's a French lowrider. If my French was better, I could come up with a phrase for that.
Yeah.
But at highway speed, they would lower down.
Okay.
And I just was talking to a guy, Cars and Coffee, who had one of those that the brakes on it, it's a button. It's not a pedal. It's a little button that you press down on. And he said it will put you through the windshield. If you get in it and you've never driven it before, you'll be eating the windshield.
So you're going down the road and you just hit like the eject button, but it's the brakes or what?
Yeah, right.
God,
These things are sexy.
crazy.
like a horizontal
They're so
James
cool.
Bond
Yeah.
sort of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these things.
Wow.
How the hell what podcast do you end up talking about citrons?
Well,
After,
I know.
Yeah.
after your news
I didn't
career?
even know. I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Jeremy, while you're doodling on Google there, I wonder if does Peugeot even make a car anymore? Renault certainly
Renault
does.
yeah.
And they are, they're very active in Formula One and rallying.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Oh, it looks like a Kia.
They all look the same now, and I'll tell you what, dude. That's part of my thing with mine is there is nothing that is inspirational.
I don't know.
looking anymore.
The new
they
Ford
all-
Bronco looks pretty sweet.
I don't. Did they even release what it actually looks like yet?
I've
I've seen renderings.
all of
Yeah.
this stuff looks like a Honda CRV.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what probably Honda's most successful small SUV ever. And why not copy it? I mean, Toyota with a RAV4, guess what? It looks like a CRV now.
Yeah.
And what's Peugeot making? Oh, look, it looks like a CRV.
Yeah.
Well,
What
I
a
think
shock.
that's the curse of the computer age is that you put something into a wind tunnel and you put something onto a computer and you do the math and then this is what you end up with, and that's why everything looks like it. You don't have a guy sitting there putting a pen to paper and
The old school drafting.
I'm gonna make this thing look sick. Like that just doesn't happen as much anymore.
That's where all those lines came from, on the coming off the hood and the fins and stuff like in the 50s,
yeah.
right? I mean, that all had to be from pencil and paper. It's
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
think about when you're a kid and you see a Lamborghini and you go, "Oh my God, that's outrageous!"
It looks like a
'Cause
spaceship.
It looks like
Yeah.
nothing else out there. And now, you've got a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, a McLaren, blah 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 blah. They all have the same basic structure and style to them. It doesn't look like a guy went and said, "I'm going to make something to just."
Even the
knock
new
your socks
Corvette.
off.
Even the new Corvette.
That
Yeah.
looks like everything else.
it looks like a
right?
McLaren
It
now
would
or
fit in the
something. It's
same-
weird.
Same
yeah.
lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't perfectly fit in the same mold. But
Yeah.
it'd be pretty close.
Boy, am I a grouch.
Well, anyway. No, but on the other hand, I have not driven any of these rocket ships.
Yeah.
Nobody's in the mood to hand over the keys, to their Maserati.
I don't think I'd fit in them.
You'd
That's
be
my
surprised.
problem.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got to figure it out.
You would fit,
Yeah.
but if you wanted to take a shaving kit, I'm sorry, there's no room for that.
Right.
You picking up a pizza,
forget about it.
at Papa Murphy. No, you have to strap that to the roof.
Yeah.
No, that cars. And what? And I'll ask this because I'm an old guy, but are cars sort of going away because the young people who are 16, 17 years old, they really don't care about a car? I mean, maybe they would get a car for a day,
I don't know. I'm
Ride
no fried chicken, but I would think that it still has that sort of nostalgia to it, right? It's a sense of freedom, right? Once you get, not as much as when you or I were growing up, because were just, here's the keys, go for it, right?
I keep reading though, and I don't want to go down a gloom and doom trail here, but a lot of automotive writers are saying, look, we're the last generation that
Yeah, I guess
reveres
there's-
these old cars.
I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely.
There's
Yeah.
a ton of people, or a lot of kids now, too, that just have opted out, especially if they live in a city where Uber's available.
Yeah,
I know kids, or I have friends that have kids that have just said, they've offered to buy them a car. They don't want one. They'll just Uber everywhere.
that's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah.
God,
My parents.
There's people that don't know how to drive.
Yeah,
yeah.
My parents were, they knew that as soon as they handed me the keys, trouble would ensue, and it
Yeah.
did. But
Yeah.
because even my dad was a doctor, and he told me when I was in high school, he said, "You will never own a motorcycle." I said, "Well, maybe." No. He said, "Look at me. You will never own a motorcycle."
Yeah.
And so, of course, by the time I was 19 years old, living in an apartment off campus at a college, I bought a little Honda, 160 Scrambler,
Yeah.
completely off the books, and my dad never found out about it. I wound up dropping it on a curve where they had just put down some fresh asphalt with gravel, and I'd gone around that curve near campus 100 times, and I was not going. It was like wham, I'm down. My knees are all skinned up, my butt's skinned up, my elbow's skinned up, and I thought, you know what? With all due respect, Bobby, to you and your motorcycles,
Yeah.
I thought it's you against the world if you're on
It
a
really
motorcycle.
is.
You get hurt by anything.
Yeah,
You know,
you
a
have to have
bug.
your head on
I got
the
hit
swivel.
in the cheek with a bug one time, and I had a black eye. It's like, wait a minute. I began to think my dad was right. So yeah, I sold that motorcycle and never got another one. But they are, I do love them. I mean, I'll walk around.
Yeah, I'm
and
not
look
on them as much as I used to be, for sure. I mean, having kids has changed that, and
Yeah.
all the people on the roads on their cell phones half the time while they're driving these newer cars drives me nuts. So I'm a little apprehensive to just get out there and bang the bars like I used to, So maybe I'm just getting old, but I like having them in the garage at least.
Well, yeah. What motorcycles do you have?
Currently I just have one, and it's a project bike. It's a 94 FXR P model, and it's Harley built that model from, and I may be screwing this up. I'm gonna get a bunch of hate from all my FXR buddies.
We're getting into deep motorcycle talk.
It was 82 to 94, I believe, that they built it, and it's a specific frame, and they say it's Harley's. In my opinion, it's Harley's best handling bike.
It's a V-twin?
It's a V-twin.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got the Evo motor, and the P stands for police, so it was a police model bike. And what guys do is they strip all that stuff off. Some guys leave it on, but mine's got a lot of the original stuff. Like it's got the original air cleaner cover that says Harley Davidson Police on it, and the gauges say police, and it's still got the siren buttons, but none of that stuff's there. It's all ripped off now.
Were they a little hotter? Did they?
They sit a little bit higher. So like they were built to ride off of like a sidewalk or to do a quick U-turn,
gotcha.
and your feet are underneath you. I grew up on dirt bikes growing up here, and it was just something that it was always around. Like my grandfather, my uncles, everybody just, here's a dirt bike, here's a hand-me-down bike. And I think growing up on a dirt bike and having them give those to me and fix them when they were broke and stuff has made me a better rider on the street, for sure.
So you were the kid that my dad would look at and just shake his head.
Yeah.
Like,
So I think it goes both ways, because I know a lot of friends that I had that grew up and they didn't ride dirt bikes at all, and then they go out and buy a crotch rocket and they down it, or something like that. So you really do have to have your head on a swivel, and you got to be paying attention all the time. And it's easy to break the rules on a bike. It's easy to go over the speed limit. It's easy to weave in and out of cars, and I think once you start doing stuff like that, you're pretty much risking your life because there's no airbag, there's no protection.
Living in Los Angeles, which I did for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And commuting to work. I don't know how there are any motorcycle drivers left in California, because on a 5-lane Ventura freeway,
Yep.
I'm in my lane, and all of a sudden, boom! A guy on a motorcycle has just driven between lanes. I'm going 30. He was probably going 60, 70, and that happened all the time.
It's legal. It's called splitting lanes.
Well, of course.
I lived there for 20 years, and it was
totally legal.
crazy.
But I just, all I could think of is, what if I had just sort of, was changing the channel on the radio.
Looking at your iPhone.
Well, this was pre-iPhone
Yeah.
back in those days. But nowadays, you're right.
Yeah.
The distraction factors would, it's spooky enough to be driving down C470, and you're looking at the car in front of you, and they're kind of, they're a little out of their lane, and okay, now they're a little off on the shoulder, and you think, I don't want to be behind this person, so you kind of try to get around them, and you look over, and they're staring at a phone.
Yeah.
The phone is right there. on their
They're on Instagram or Facebook, guaranteed.
Right, at the right there on the wheel.
Yeah.
It's not like it's sitting in a rack and they're reaching over like a radio to touch on it.
Yeah.
They've got one hand controlling the phone and trying to, steer with their elbow and poke at the screen. Gives me the willies.
Yeah, I mean, they have all this technology now, like Apple CarPlay. If you're an Apple guy, you can plug your phone into it, and it automatically comes up on your display, and you can talk to it and get all your text messages and all that stuff out. But I don't know that that's really the...
Well, maybe we're
solving the issue.
Are we going there to autonomous cars?
Yeah.
Are we headed that way?
I mean, we're headed that way for sure.
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know. I've done a lot of driving out west, and I just every now and then I think, do I want that big semi?
Well, the classics will still be on
pulling a triple trailer
Yeah.
through Utah where it's legal. They can have not one, not two, but they can have 3 trailer attachments to a tractor head going down the interstate at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Do I want that thing without even a driver behind the wheel? It's been programmed to go from
Right.
Salt Lake City to St. George, Utah. I get the willies over.
Go back to the train system. Put it on rails.
Yeah, that'd be a great thing to check on. Are the railroads doing okay financially?
I really don't know.
Yeah, that may be a homework assignment for me.
Yeah.
Because I haven't given trains a whole lot of thought, but I saw a commercial the other day for the Great Gorge railroad trip you can take here in Colorado. I've never done that.
Yeah, there's some great ones. The one right up at Silver Plume is amazing if you've never done that.
My wife took the kids there when I was been shot out of a cannon
Yeah.
for some news story, and they said they had a great time, but a lot of coal dust and stuff.
Yeah.
Because of the wind dropped right on them on the train, but it was a good time.
Part of the experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's like smelling the gasoline fumes while you're driving your old 911 Porsche. Like,
yeah.
Is this going to kill me, or is this
Am I going to catch on fire, or am I getting a buzz right now?
Right. I'm huffing my own car.
Well, Jack, I can't believe it. 2 hours has gone by like super fast, and yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you, but we're coming short on our time here, and
all right, man.
I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing your honest opinions with us, and I really appreciate that.
Well, nice to be here. I appreciate the invite. Looking forward to listening to some more of your podcasts.
Yeah, thanks. You want to tell people where they can find you on Instagram or Facebook or any of that, or you want to keep it private?
No, Instagram is where I put a lot of fishing pictures and car pictures. It's Jack Chesnutt 812. I've got my name right out there. I figure from
you should put some of your fish art on there too.
Well, I might do that. I for a while all I did was put car pictures there, and now I put a few sort of beauty fish kind of stuff there. Yeah, Jack Chesnutt 812, and my spelling is weird. It's no T in the middle, 2 T's at the end. Chesnutt. Jack Chesnutt 812. I'm kind of pissed off at Facebook, so I'm kind of
It's kind of old news these days.
Well, I'm kind of backing out of it. It's confrontational. All my friends on Facebook are real friends, people I've known and worked with and gone to school with over the years. But even so, it's a contentious place to be, and I just find Instagram to be more picture oriented, more photography oriented, and that might be just because that's what I'm doing and that's who I'm following is other photographers, and come on by. I'll stick some of my art up there too.
Awesome, yeah,
Okay.
I totally think you should. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. Jeremy, you all good back there?